Welcome to the Emerald City Sportscast.
Wilson, as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Metcalf for the touchdown.
Hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Viennes.
Here's the drive deep to left. He has done it again. Wow. Kyle Lewis, 3 games, 3 home runs. Mariners have a 5-2 lead.
Brought to you by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. World-class audio recording right in the heart of the Woodinville Winery District.
Wide receivers to either side. Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over, baby.
Touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl.
And now, broadcasting live from the Dan Cave Studios, here's your host, Dan Viennes.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Emerald City Sportscast. Lots to talk about today. So I have become an early riser in my late age, and along with that means that I go to bed kind of early, too, which means I missed out on breaking news last night. And we're going to talk all about that today because it was pretty cool news to wake up to. So I've got Chris Cluff standing by. We're going to talk all about the new hire by the Seahawks, but I've got more about that in a second. Let's get right to the headlines, shall we?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
And now, here's today's headlines, brought to you by FreeBets, the newest online sports betting comparison site. Check them out at freebets.us. I hit one too many buttons there. Sorry about that. After an exhaustive, wide-ranging, 3-week search, the Seahawks have finally chosen their new offensive coordinator. ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting first that the Seahawks intend to hire Rams passing game coordinator Shane Waldron as their new OC, replacing Brian Schottenheimer, who was fired after 3 years in Seattle. Nothing official from the Seahawks yet, but this is going to be the hire. I'll give you Waldron's resume and discuss this move in depth, coming up with Chris Cluff in just a few moments. According to reports, the Mariners may be one of a handful of teams interested in signing free agent second baseman Colton Wong. The 30-year-old has spent his entire 8-year career with the Cardinals, winning the National League Gold Glove Award at second base the last 2 seasons. If the season started today, Dylan Moore, the likely starter at second base. The question now is, when will spring training begin? The Players Union pushing for an on-time start, which would be February 17th for the Mariners. Major League Baseball, however, considering delaying the start of the Cactus League for as much as a month as the continued prevalence of COVID-19 cases in the area in Arizona. Still a big issue down there. And the Seattle Kraken take another step forward as they get ready for their inaugural season to begin later this year, announcing a deal with Root Sports to be their regional TV partner. About 75 games will be televised on Root. At the same time, they revealed that longtime Carolina Hurricanes play-by-play announcer John Forsland will be the voice of the Kraken on their televised games. As I said, much to discuss today, all of it Seahawk related, so let's take a quick break because when I come back, I want to give all the time in the show today to our special guest, Chris Cluff. We're going to be breaking down the hiring of Shane Waldron by the Seahawks. You are listening to the Emerald City Sportscast on the new 365 Sportscast Network. Place of inspiration to record your next musical or vocal project? Why not do it in the middle of wine country? Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio is a 4-room boutique recording studio in the heart of Woodinville Tourist District on Hollywood Hill. Within walking distance of over 100 different wine, beer, and spirit tasting rooms, this peaceful setting offers a respite from the rat race of everything around it. The studio features 14-foot ceilings throughout and a large main tracking room, along with separate isolation rooms for drum tracking and vocals. Featuring a talented crew of freelance engineers and an impressive array of industry-leading equipment, my friends at Hollywood and Vine Studios can assist with your audio tracking, mixing, and mastering pursuits. To find out more or to book a session, email Kevin at hollywood-vines.com, call 206-235-8125, or visit hollywood-vines.com. If you're like me, you love animals. I mean, you love animals. And if you're looking to add a new furry friend to your family, the best way to show your love is by supporting no-kill animal adoption centers. And the best way to do that is by checking out NoKillNetwork.org. The volunteers at No Kill Network seek not only to support no-kill adoption centers, but help make a change by working with all animal shelters to change their policies and make sure every pet has the chance to find their human. And with the COVID pandemic, many of these shelters are full, and these pets need you. So check out NoKillNetwork.org for a list of no-kill shelters near you. And there's even a handy adoption pet finder tool you can use to help you find your next best friend. That's NoKillNetwork.org. Online gamers, have you checked out PSX Extreme? If not, you're missing out. PSX Extreme is a cutting-edge gaming website providing you with everything you need to know about the latest and greatest games. You'll find up-to-the-minute news about the gaming industry, as well as in-depth reviews of all the coolest games. The writing staff at PSX Extreme will also keep you informed on all the rumors about new games in development and impending releases. So if you can put down the controller just for a second, do yourself a favor and check out psxextreme.com.
You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast, presented by Hollywood and Vine's recording studio. And now, here's Dan.
All right, everybody, welcome back. The story of focus today, the Seahawks hiring Shane Waldron as their new offensive coordinator, replacing Brian Schottenheimer after a 3-week search. Quick resume on Waldron, 41 years old, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. That may have been a factor in this entire relationship. Broke into the NFL in 2008-2009 as a quality control assistant and a tight ends coach with the Patriots. Went to the UFL for a while, did some college coaching with the University of Massachusetts. Interesting that he was the offensive line coach there for a season. Joined the Redskins in 2016. That's where he lined up with Sean McVay. Went with McVay to the Rams in 2017 as initially tight end coach. 2019 added quarterback coach to his duties when Zach Taylor was hired in Cincinnati. So he basically advanced when Matt LaFleur was hired away and then advanced again when Zach Taylor was hired away. Here to break it all down with me is my good friend Chris Cluff, sporting the Coug gear. I absolutely love it. Chris, can you hear me? Is everything good on your end?
I hear you, Dan. You hear me?
Awesome, yeah. It's good to have you. Look, you and I talked about getting together last week. And then it was Inauguration Day, not the best day to get together. And then our biggest fear over the last couple of days was that news was going to break either while we were on the air or at one point I thought we might have to tape this interview last night, and we were afraid it was going to happen overnight. Thank goodness we're able to go live today because we wake up to this news. What are your initial impressions on the hiring of Shane Waldron?
Well, my first thought was if you can't beat them, have them join you. So obviously, the Seahawks have watched the Rams up close. They know what they've done to them and the rest of the league. You know, they were just in the Super Bowl as well. So, they understand that offense pretty well. And, this is a guy who, like you just said, he's from this area, from the Northwest. So he's kind of coming back home a little bit. And, I think a lot of people are excited from what I'm seeing on the social media spheres, and we'll see what he brings. But it feels like he's going to bring a balance of kind of what Pete wants and what Russell was talking about, with tempo versus, actually running the ball. The Rams are a good running team too, as well as passing. So, I think it's overall a thumbs up from a lot of people right now.
Yeah, you touched on it. I think we all kind of expected, and maybe this is just because we've seen similar things unfold with the Seahawks over the last couple of years. I even said it on the show last week that the way the search was going, I just kind of thought Dave Canales was going to end up being the fallback candidate, maybe a guy like Kirby Wilson coming in to run the run game. Things changed over the weekend, though, when we went from former head coaches, guys with offenses that don't really inspire the fan base, and then over the weekend, Ken Dorsey and Shane Waldron came out as reported contacts of the Seahawks. It seemed like late in the process, after the first couple of weeks, there was a shift in what they were looking for. What do you attribute that to?
I feel like they just kind of started out by just putting a big blanket out there. I feel like the early talks, the early word that they were talking to coaches that were recently fired was just kind of maybe feeling out where those coaches were. And, there was a lot of talk about Anthony Lynn's entire staff, Pep Hamilton, Shane Steichen, his assistants on offense. So, I mean, they were kind of like just kind of branching out a bit. And, I had mentioned Ken Dorsey before he came out just because I knew what a great job he'd done with Josh Allen in Buffalo. And I thought that he would be a guy that they might have some interest in because, I know Buffalo hasn't run the ball as well as they wanted to, but that is one of the things they want to do. The coach came out, just this week after they lost in the playoffs to, hey, we want to run more next year. So, Dorsey was a guy that, kind of had Pete's mentality, I think, and the ability to elevate a quarterback. Look, the big thing is with Russ is he just needs to be consistent through a season. He goes through these stretches where, how many times over the last every single year for the first half of the season, he's an MVP candidate, but then, then they fade. They always fade. By the time they get to the playoffs, they're not as prepared. They're not as well planned as other teams are, and they end up losing, and I think that is why they bring in Shane Waldron is for the playoffs. It's not necessarily for the regular season. It's for the plan that he can create in the playoffs, using the McVay system. And, I think they're just hoping that they can marry the things that both Russ and Pete want to do and make it work in the playoffs. And that's the key to me, is the playoffs.
Yeah, that certainly seems like the real sore thumb over the last half of last season. And what we saw in the playoffs the previous 2 years is if Schottenheimer had a blind spot, it was, his week in, week out scheming and plans to attack whatever that team was they were facing that week. I feel like the Giants game was the first real indication that was something he was struggling with. And not just adjusting week to week, but within games wasn't quick enough. If there's anyone that's respected around the league as someone that's good at that, it's Sean McVay. And now we're starting to see his little offspring all around the league. And really the only negative feedback that I've seen anywhere online this morning are only from fans who've never heard of Shane Waldron. And usually unfamiliarity, breeds contempt. People think, oh, he must not be very good because I've never heard of him. But when you look at what Matt LaFleur's gone on to do and what Zach Taylor was starting to do in Cincinnati before Joe Burrow got hurt without calling the plays in L.A. as well, there's got to be a lot for the fans to really grab onto to be optimistic about this move, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's true that Waldron has not called plays, but look, he started out in the Patriots organization for one. So Tom Brady, he coached Rob Gronkowski. He has a real background in tight ends, obviously. The Rams use their tight ends really well, kind of sneakily well. They don't necessarily put up the great numbers, week in and week out because they have so many other great players on offense, and they spread the ball all around. But that's one thing I'm looking forward to is how the Seahawks use their tight ends. They've been so underwhelming in their use of tight ends over the years, from Darrell Bevell to Brian Schottenheimer, that maybe Waldron's going to come in and have some real good. Schottenheimer had some good plays for his tight ends. He just didn't use them enough, or in the right situations. And I feel like maybe Waldron will do that.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that really came to mind when I found out he was a candidate was, I think there's a lot of talent in that room, even with Greg Olsen retiring. Will Dissly, we saw what he could do the last two early seasons before this year, before he got hurt his first two seasons in the league. And just the physical traits that Colby Parkinson brings to the role. Jacob Hollister's a free agent. Don't know if they'll try to bring him back or if they can afford to, but there's a lot of talent there to work with. And when you see what he did with Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, and you're right, they weren't consistent weapons, but they always seemed to go to the tight end in key moments and crucial moments for real crucial plays. What else do you think he'll bring, assuming, of course, and I think the press conference is going to be fascinating, hearing him speak for the first time. What are some of the other elements of that Rams offense you think that will fit the personnel that's already on hand with the Seahawks?
Well, they use a lot of pre-snap motion. They like their jet sweeps as well. The Seahawks have been running that play for quite a while. They do a lot of play action, which, Russ is really good at that. They love to roll out Goff. I mean, frankly, McVay and Waldron have made Goff better than he really is. And I know he kind of took a step back this past season, but the previous 2 years, I mean, they were lights on fire. I mean, he really was elevated based on the play calling, and that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for the play caller to elevate the quarterback, and imagine elevating Russell Wilson and sustaining his stellar play through an entire season.
Yeah,
that's really what I'm looking for, is the sustaining through December and into the playoffs that we just haven't seen the past few years. Really since maybe 2015, 2016 when he was carrying the whole offense. It's really the last few years, even under Schottenheimer, that Wilson and the offense have not sustained. And that to me, that's what this is all about, is finding a play caller who can sustain Wilson's play and help him against. If you look back, look at all the great defenses they play at the end of the season every year. Because first of all, they finished with their division, and the division has been strong on defense for the last decade.
Yeah.
You got the Niners, you got the Rams. The Cardinals are up and down on defense, but sometimes they're hard, sometimes they aren't. But the whole division, for the most part, has been strong, and they always finish with those three. Plus, throw in a couple other good defenses. Whether it was the Eagles or the Giants this last year or whoever. You're always running into good defenses toward the end, it seems, and that's when they have trouble. I mean, they've really kind of faltered. So really, you want to be able to sustain, and I think this is a kind of a big step toward trying to do that.
Mike Holmgren kind of called this the other day, didn't he? If you go to Chris's website, Chalk Talk, the most recent story on there is recapping a conversation Mike Holmgren had a couple of days ago, where he talked about what he wants to see from the new coordinator and specifically how he wants him to utilize Russell Wilson. And he pretty much nailed everything that the Rams are about on offense, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Mike was talking on KJR. He was talking about just how you want to help your quarterback, and the idea of don't move your quarterback. Basically change the aiming point of the defense so they're not always just knowing where to go to get the quarterback.
Yeah.
So it's about moving him in different ways, and utilizing quick passes or different. The Seahawks have done some of this. Obviously, they do it sometimes. They just don't do it consistently enough. And this is kind of what Shane Waldron hopefully will bring, is the whole Sean McVay philosophy and attitude and approach to offense, which is doing a lot of things from the same look. That's kind of what the Rams do. They have pretty much the same personnel out there, but they will use them in different ways. They'll run a lot of different plays off the same look. They'll fool you into thinking it's going to be one thing. And I'm really big on subterfuge, misdirection, confusing, disguising. I mean, that's the defenses are so good in the NFL. And when you run across a defense that's very well coached, you really have to be well coached on offense to beat that defense. And that's the key here. That's what this is really all about trying to do.
Yeah, it's something I love too. It's something the Rams and the 49ers are both known for, is they run and pass plays out of the same formations. They'll set one up, run out of a run formation with the same look, and then come back to a pass play from it later on. And it's funny, you mentioned that they do move Russ sometimes, but not enough. And my criticism is never proactively enough. It takes them, if he's just getting his rear end kicked in the first half by a tough pass rush and the offensive line struggling, maybe they'll come out early in the second half after talking about it at halftime and call a couple of role plays. But there was a drive in the Green Bay-Tampa Bay game this weekend. I can't remember if it was Green Bay's first drive or second drive where they were backed up on their own 3, and the first 2 plays were passing plays, and they were getting killed with the pass rush. So immediately, Matt LaFleur calls a designed rollout, and I think Rodgers connected for like 15 yards, got a long first down. They actually drove down, got their first points on that drive. It was like, that's how quickly he reacted to what was happening, and that's something that was really lacking with Brian Schottenheimer. Let's talk about that running game. It would seem another point that I think bodes well for Waldron. When you look at that Rams offensive line, which was very good in 2018, took a step back last year, was pretty good this year. They don't have great athletes up front. They have big, strong guys that are tough and know their assignments and execute well. That would seem to match up pretty well with how Mike Solari likes to coach his offensive line and kind of what they have on hand already, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Holmgren talked about this too, and I kind of agreed with a lot of what Holmgren said on KGR. He said, look, it's not all on the offensive line. And I know there are a lot of people who are ripping the offensive line saying, hey, we got to really upgrade this offense. Well, they have been upgrading. I mean, Brandon Shell was an upgrade. Lewis was an upgrade. Posick was a mild surprise. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do at center. They've got to figure that part out. And obviously they need a new left guard because Mikey.
Austin Blythe is a free agent.
Yeah. So, they definitely have a couple positions they've got to figure out what they're doing there. But Dwayne Brown's coming off one of his best seasons, stayed healthy, and wants to keep playing. That's awesome. So they have 3/5 of their line. I mean, their line's going to be fine. As long as they figure out the center part, their line's going to be fine. And Waldron will work with it. I mean, it's a pretty good core to start with. So you just need to make sure you have a good center in there. And somehow, they have some options in-house for left guard. It's just a matter of whether they think Phil Haynes or Jamarco Jones or maybe Chance Warmack, who will be back, after a couple years out. If any of those guys fit that left guard role, or if they need to get one somewhere else or draft one, perhaps. Apparently, it's a good class for offensive linemen this year. So I'm not too concerned about the offensive line. It's really more about the play caller helping everybody. That's his job, is to help the offensive line. Especially against a team like the Rams. I mean, it just like going back to that post about what Holmgren was saying on KJR. Move your quarterback. Don't keep him in the same spot. That hurts your offensive line when you're just plopping him right there, and the defense all knows how to get there. And you have Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd, coming right, converging at all times. So, it's just about mixing things up enough to help your offensive line as well. So I think they'll do that. I think they have what they need on offensive line, and they'll augment that, and then it'll all come together hopefully with this play caller who can blend it all together.
Now, the big elephant in the room on offense might be the big running back in the room, and that is Chris Carson, scheduled for free agency, as is Carlos Hyde, his primary backup. Rashad Penny, we don't know if he can stay healthy for an entire season. He'll be back. DJ Dallas will be back. Travis Homer. But when you look at the kinds of backs that the Rams have deployed, obviously tremendous success with Todd Gurley before his knees betrayed him, and then it looked like they found something with Cam Akers in the second half of last year that he can be a similar guy in that role. Do you think Chris Carson, if they want to bring him back, would fit what we've seen from the Rams as kind of a blueprint?
Yeah, I mean Carson's would be fine, but
can they afford him?
Want to see what he can get in free agency, and Pete Carroll has already said they're going to let him go check free agency out. So that to me signals they're not going to pay him, which they shouldn't. A lot of money, that is. And I feel like Carson's going to be one of those guys, especially in this odd year of salary cap being pretty tight for most teams. He's probably going to end up on a prove-it deal because he couldn't stay healthy again last season. Yep. So one-year deal somewhere. And usually when guys take one-year deals, it's elsewhere. It's not with the team that they're coming from. So I feel like it's a strong chance he's going to move on. But if he is back, it'll be on a one-year prove-it type of deal for, I'm thinking, $5 or $6 million. That's probably all he's really worth to the Seahawks, considering he's not always available for you.
Yeah.
So, but I think he'd fit if he is back. I think he's totally, he's what Pete likes. He has multiple skills. He definitely could catch the ball. So he would fit into what Waldron does. I think fine. It's just a question of whether he finds a better situation for himself somewhere else. That's all.
How much do you think, what kind of a role do you think Russ played in this search process? He said 2 weeks ago, he was very outspoken. He wanted to be a part of it. He thought that was important. And when you looked again at the beginning of this process, it kind of looked like Carroll was poking around down some familiar avenues for himself. And then he ends up hiring a guy that would seem to be kind of outside of his comfort zone or his bubble. Do you think Russ played a big part in this?
Well, I saw something from Brady Henderson, who's an ESPN reporter, that said yes, he was on board with the signing. So I'm just going to go off of that. Yeah. But if you look at what the Rams do on offense, it's a lot of what Russ said he wanted to do. They do tempo. They do get the ball out quickly, which obviously Russ saying that is kind of counter to what he actually does on the field sometimes. where he holds
we'll find out how that works.
Yeah, but he said, tempo is a big thing that he wants to do, and he wants to be dynamic. And the Rams' offense is dynamic. So I feel like based on Brady, Brady's source, he was on board, and I feel like they wouldn't have hired someone after he made a big deal of saying how critical this was, how imperative these next 10 years are for him, and for not just his career but the Seahawks. I feel like they definitely consulted him and got somebody that he was going to be comfortable with.
It feels like this is a really pivotal hire in what we're going to see from Russ for the rest of his career, because we've all seen it for the last couple of years in the system that Schottenheimer tried to run, which was an extension of what Pete Carroll wanted, which was establish the run, set up the explosive pass play, which we would all scream at our televisions every week, resulted in way too long, slow developing plays, lots of multiple vertical routes down the field while Russ waits for those to develop, putting more pressure, as you said, on the offensive line. We know, based on his background, that they're bringing Shane Waldron in to be the antithesis of that and to do all these things that we've all said for the last year or two need to be done to get the most out of Russ. So if this doesn't work and Russ still struggles to adapt and really give the coordinator what he wants out of his system, it could be pivotal. I just made up a new word, pivotal for him, and really telling about what might happen with him down the road, wouldn't you say?
I feel like here's the thing about Russell Wilson. There were reasons that a bunch of teams didn't want to draft him in 2012, right? I mean, height obviously was the glaring number one thing. And that certainly, look, he has had tons of success. I mean, think about it. Nobody else wanted him. Pete gave him a shot because John Schneider said, let's give this guy a shot. Yeah. And he's had a great career. I mean, the people who rip Russell Wilson maybe, can't look at it from his shoes of, how hard it can be for him at his height to do certain things. Like if there's not a passing lane, he can't see the middle of the field, short middle. He can't see it. So that is certainly a flaw in his game. He also, you could say it's both it's a double-edged sword that he is so patient back there and is always looking, waiting for the last second to make a play. And a lot of times it burns him, but there are times where he burns the other team. Yeah. So there are certain things you just have to live with Russell Wilson, but knowing that they would not have won a Super Bowl without Wilson, or at least a quarterback of his caliber. They had the defense, but, thinking all the way back to that season, 2012, 2013, they were only missing a quarterback. And, Russell Wilson turned into their quarterback. Now, yes, it has been disappointing that they've been flaming out the last few years in the first round, the second round. They just haven't been able to get over that hump, whether it's because of defense or the offense, fading away, whatever it was. I feel like Schottenheimer really cost them the Dallas playoff game a couple years ago, and I feel like he was a big reason that they lost against the Rams as well. The offense just obviously looked horrible. And Wilson, you look at Wilson, you're like, what is he doing? It's not all on him, but certainly some of it is on him, And yes, this hire is important simply because we want to get Wilson playing again consistently through the season as well and as excellently as we know he can. Yeah. And for that reason, yes, this is an important hire to just keep the offense going through deeper into the playoffs, to make it functional in the playoffs. And that, to me, again, it comes back to winning playoff games because they always get to the playoffs. Yep. It's just a question of are they prepared enough once they get there. So that's why, to me, this is a huge hire.
It's refreshing to hear someone else acknowledge that Russell Wilson isn't perfect. I love the guy. I'm frustrated, though, sometimes engaging other fans in debate because they have a hard time separating rational thought from their emotions. They love the guy. He's our quarterback. He can do no wrong. And if you dare criticize him, then you hate him. I don't hate Russell Wilson. I love the guy. I hope he finishes his career as a Seattle Seahawk. But I threw something out on Twitter the other day. I don't know if you saw it. And I got skewered for it when it was announced that the Detroit Lions were going to be parting ways with Matthew Stafford. I suggested that if Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford were both available on the open market right now in trade, and if Russell Wilson, assuming he didn't have no trade power, that I think all things being where they stand today with the two quarterbacks, that Matthew Stafford might demand more trade value in return than Russell Wilson. I didn't have this in my notes, but while I got you here, what do you think of my scenario? Do you agree with me or not?
my thing about Stafford is he really has had some health issues the last couple of years.
Sure.
And he had the broken back issue. That could have been real serious, but he came back from it. But he always just seems to get beat up a lot. And I don't know if that's maybe a function of their offense. It's just not very good. Their offensive line isn't very good. Maybe their scheme hasn't been good. Obviously, they're on to yet another new coach. Yeah. And he's done with that. He wants out of there. I don't blame him. But, people who say, oh, yeah, Matthew Stafford is, he's got, a ton of years left. I don't know if he has a ton of years left, frankly. I mean, the guy has really been beat up in his career.
I was surprised to find out that they were the same age. I just assumed, it just felt like he was older than Russ, but they're within months of each other. Yeah. Yeah. And to me, durability is huge, and Russ has never missed a game. Yeah. And you look at Phillip Rivers. I don't think he ever missed a game either. So, he heck of a career. And you just, that's an underrated ability at quarterback. Look at Tom Brady. The 1 year they missed the playoffs. The 1 year where he had his ACL or, week 1 or whatever. And other than that, the Patriots always make the playoffs because Brady's always there for them. Yep. Russell's always there for the Seahawks, and they always make the playoffs, and they will. I've always said, as long as Russ is on the team, they will never be a below 500 team ever while he's on their team. So to the Stafford question, Stafford is a solid quarterback. I think Russell Wilson has the capability, he's just the next level as long as you coach him and help him, and because he does have some deficiencies that you need to coach around and to, you need to magnify his positives more. And really that's kind of, to me, Shane Waldron's job is to magnify Russell Wilson's positives. Exactly. And that was why I got beat up so bad, is people thought I was saying I thought Matt Stafford was a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. I wasn't. I was just saying that his skill set was the kind that GMs can dream on, and they always think they can make the most of it, and being the same age, costing a little less contractual obligation. I thought it was an interesting scenario to throw out there for sure.
It's fun, and it's fun to think about, you got quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson apparently wants out of Houston. I can't blame him either. You got the drama in Green Bay with Rodgers, who I'm sure is not going anywhere this year. But
now there's drama in L.A. again with the Goff comments. So
and as Sean McVay loses all of his coaches, his entire coaching staff disappears before it's very.
Been rabid. He kept Kevin McConnell Kevin O'Connell. He got to do that. So, you wonder too. I guess I had forgotten that. I wonder. When they started, I think Mike Kafka was really the first candidate that was named that made me think, hey, maybe they are looking at younger, more innovative, kind of forward-thinking type candidates. He ended up choosing to stay in Kansas City. So I was a little skeptical when the Waldron name came out, but he was passed over, essentially, when McVay brought Kevin O'Connell in from Washington to be offensive coordinator, when it seemed like Waldron would be the next guy in line after Zach Taylor left. That combined with being from Portland, at first I thought, they're not going to be able to get this guy. I wonder if the local ties had something to do with that. I want to talk about some other things while we have time, because this is a crucial offseason. One of the reasons this hire seems so crucial is because it's really one of the only avenues that they have available to try and really make an impact and make a dramatic change and put them over the hump to get deeper into the playoffs, because there's no cap space to speak of. They can create some. We'll talk about that in a minute. Lots of extension issues and questions, free agency questions facing this team. Where do they go from here? Now that this is settled, what's the next first offseason priority?
I think probably the next thing, other than the Senior Bowl going on this year, that I'm sure John Schneider's really focused on, this week. There's not going to be much of an off season. I saw where Stanford already canceled their pro day. There's not going to be a combine. They've already announced that. Pro days are going to be where teams are able to get, whatever extra information they can get on players. And when teams like Stanford, cancel, and they'll be the first of many, I'm sure, that won't run one. So you're going to have very limited information. And frankly, that's why, Schneider was willing to make the Jamal Adams trade last July, is because he knew this draft was going to be a worse crapshoot than any other draft in recent memory, So I think that's number one is, kind of what's the draft prep look like? How are you going to be able to get information on a lot of these guys? And how are you going to navigate not having information on a lot of guys? I can totally see just drafting from big colleges, not drafting small school guys, obviously undrafted guys, maybe you pull from some of that, but I can see this leaning toward, for the Seahawks anyway, more of a big school draft than they've ever had, perhaps. And Schneider's going to try to get more draft picks too. Yeah. He's only got 4 right now. He's got a 2, a 4, a 5, and a 7. So that Jamal Adams trade basically kind of robbed them of the 1 and their 3, and then they lost another pick in another deal. So, he's going to try to find a way. He will always want to do volume drafts, no matter how crapshooty the draft is. So he's going to try to work his way into other things, and that might include trading some guys. I've mentioned Jaron Reed and Quandre Diggs as possible trade guys for the Seahawks if he really does want to try to get back. Like maybe a 3rd rounder plus something else for one of those guys. So I think he might be looking at trades, and then he's waiting for the salary cap. What is the salary cap going to be? That's huge for the free agency part of it, the veteran part of the off season. So those are the 3 things: is what's the draft prep look like? Are we going to look into making some trades to get more draft picks, and what's the salary cap going to look like before we jump into re-signing players?
Yeah, and as tight as it does look, and according to which website you look at, somewhere between 2.8 and $4.5 million-ish, less than $1 million to roll over till next year. But here's the thing that people lose sight of. I think they think we have no cap space. We can't do anything. We can't. 2022, depending on what the cap's going to be again, and we're not going to know that for a year, about $140 million available. 2023, about $190 million. Very few obligations on the books in 2023 and beyond, outside of Russell Wilson and some guys that are currently on rookie contracts. So you can do anything you want as far as extending guys. They can make cap space, and I would think, though, that they won't be aggressive this offseason because, again, they go into 2022 without a first-round draft pick. This might be a prime time with guys like Chris Carson, Shaquille Griffin, who I want to ask you about in a second. This might be the year where you play for the comp picks to maybe add a few things to the stockpile for 2022, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, that comes down to the rest of the league too. What kind of cap space do other teams have to sign guys? I see some people trying to project Carson is, he's going to make like $8 million or this or that. I'm like, no, he's not. No, not this year. This year. And it'll be a 1-year deal, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the $5 to $6 million, and it could be less. I feel like that's what you're going to get from that. So the comp game is really going to work this offseason just because of the limitations for the entire league. You have to have other teams that can sign as well, and a lot of teams are going to be chopping guys. And got like KJ Wright, prime example. He wants $10 million a year. I mean, he wants a pay raise basically, and I think
not going to get
$10 million a year is kind of what the outside linebacker at his level kind of makes. I don't know if he's going to get that from anybody. He probably, I think there's a 50-50 chance he's back again with Seattle only because he's not going to get the raise he wants, and Seattle's still willing to pay him at a pretty good price if they work their finances right. There's still a chance that, hey, Jordan Brooks is our guy now. Sorry, KJ, you had a great year.
Yeah.
In which case maybe he's plays into that comp formula you were just talking about if KJ does leave, because some team will pay him a decent amount for a couple years, I just feel like there's just a lot of teams still have a lot of figuring out to do. So it's kind of unknown as to how great free agency is going to be. But I will also say Seahawks fans who are looking for the Seahawks to spend big on an offensive lineman or something like that, come on, guys. Like, when does John Schneider ever do that? And this is not the year he would do that or could do that, frankly.
Right. Tried to once, with TJ Lang, and that didn't work out very well in their favor. So didn't work out for TJ either, going home to Detroit. Let's talk about the defensive backfield. DJ Reed was a real revelation last year at the right cornerback spot, so much so that he literally may have changed Pete Carroll's philosophy as far as scouting and signing and drafting corners. It'll be interesting to see if that changes their behavior with acquisitions moving forward, or if he's just a unique player. But at the other spot, we know Shaquille Griffin is a free agent. I think all things being equal, if the money was there, they'd like to have him back. But Quentin Dunbar, also a free agent coming off a knee injury, his value might be down a little bit. Trey Flowers will be back for, I think, the last year of his deal and just got a little bit of a playtime raise in pay himself through the league's program. If you had to bet right now, who starts at corner on opening day next year opposite DJ Reed?
Well, I mean, Flowers, just because he's under contract, that would be my bet right now.
Took the easy way out.
Yeah, that's the easy answer. But to go a little bit deeper into it, I don't think Shaquille Griffin's going to be back because I think some team will pay him more than Seattle wants to. Yeah. And Dunbar, he had obviously the knee problem all last season, and once he's healthy, I feel like he's one of those prove-it contract type guys that the Seahawks maybe bring back for a couple $1 million. I think he was at $5 million last season. They're not going to pay him that for sure, but no team will, I don't think. So maybe he comes back for a couple $1 million, knowing that he can start and prove himself for 2022, where the cap will be pretty wide open for most teams at that point. So, and then beyond that, you're looking at the draft. Maybe they find a guy in the second round or fourth round, that fits what they want. And I'm not sure. Like you said, is Pete still married to the 32-inch arm thing? That will be a question in the wake of DJ Reed. Does Pete think, like you said, is Reed just a kind of a one-off guy who Pete admitted that the DJ surprised him in how well he could play. Apparently, Reed has like the wingspan of a 6'3" player, so that's one thing that really helps him. Is despite being only 5'9" or whatever he is, he's got a huge wingspan. So, and obviously he has wheels to burn. So, yeah, definitely he's a unique player that way. And really, maybe that's what it comes down to: is what's the wingspan of the cornerback that we're talking about in the draft or wherever. Pete likes to build up his guys from scratch. From the draft. We've seen with Kerry Williams how it fails when they bring in veteran guys who are used to doing it their own way, a different way, and they don't fit in here. It's usually the young guys. They work them up from, pups, basically. So I feel like that's kind of where they're going to go. Either they'll bring back Dunbar on a small deal, or they'll draft a guy, and then they have Flowers in reserve. I know a lot of people are down on him, and he's very inconsistent. It's true.
I thought he got better last year.
Yeah, I mean, he's streaky. Yeah. There are times he'll just play way off his guy all the time, and he'll just give up easy yards where he shouldn't give up easy yards. And that's really not the Pete Carroll way. At least it wasn't in the Legion of Boom days. It was like smash him at the line of scrimmage, don't let him get very far, and stay on him the whole way. And that's not how Flowers has played. And his conversion from safety to corner, I don't think has gone, as well maybe as Pete and John had hoped. So they're obviously still looking around to see what they can get, but it is great that they do have DJ Reed. So we'll see where that other position goes. And I just feel like Griffin probably is not going to be back. That's my guess.
Well, then add cornerback to the list of things they're going to probably try to address in the draft coming up in a couple of months, even with their limited draft capital. You mentioned the Senior Bowl. They're practicing, I think, right now. They're televising some of those practices this week. Interesting that they're still playing that game in light of everything else that's being canceled. But maybe the only real chance for coaches and scouts to get up close with some of these players, as there's one position group we haven't really talked about that I think is kind of flying under the radar, and it's probably because it's so good at the top with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. How big of a need is receiver in this draft specifically, or adding some to that group?
Yeah, I mean, you hear some people say, "Oh my gosh, we have to go out and sign a big-time, free agent at wide receiver." I was like, "Well, that's not going to happen either." But one guy I like, I've just kind of looked at a little some highlights of some different guys. Just kind of started playing around a little bit with draft. He's an underclassman coming out, not part of the Senior Bowl guys, but Brevin Jordan is a tight end from Miami who is really good. I mean, he's 6'3", 245 pounds. He's a really great open field runner for a tight end. He's the kind of guy who would actually, I think, perfectly fit Shane Waldron's offense, the McVay style of offense. So, he'd be like a second round type of guy, and they might have to move up for him based on just kind of the rankings I'm seeing right now, which are all going to change, of course, leading into the draft. But it sounds like he's a day two guy. And I don't know if that's something that they're going to prioritize is trying to find an extra weapon for Russ, David Moore has got to go. I mean, he can stay, but not as that number 3, not the jet sweeps with
not
him,
as the jet sweep guy. When you mentioned that earlier,
gosh.
that was the first thing that came to my head.
Dan was so bad. I mean, 1 yard.
Yeah.
1 yard. I mean, just like getting stuffed in the back. I know backfield. I know that was a blocking issue, but DK Metcalf missed his block on that particular play. But just things like that. If you're going to run a jet sweep, run it with one of your fastest guys. And shoot, put DJ Reed back there and run it with him. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I feel like they definitely could use an extra weapon. They're not going to pay for one. But you remember also they have Philip Dorsett coming back, from his foot injury.
Yeah.
So he's a possibility that can help open up the offense more. The guy they didn't have, and Pete said he talked to Philip, and they basically said, let's just start all over this year. So it sounds like Dorsett's going to come back and wants to play for the Seahawks. So he'll sign another minimum 1-year deal, and we'll see how he fits in 2021. So there's an option on the roster already.
Because I think about the guys that they have in LA, and they don't obviously have a DK Metcalf type. Nobody really does, but Tyler Lockett certainly would be a great fit for the crossing routes and some of those jet sweep things and things that the Rams like to do in their scheme. But you think about guys like Robert Woods and Josh Reynolds and even Van Jefferson, the rookie, and they're not necessarily the big athletic freaks. They're guys that are quick, that can make good reads, that can find space, and that have reliable hands. David Moore always teases because he makes the big play every once in a while. And there was a point this year about midway through the season where I even texted a buddy of mine and I said he's really coming on. I think maybe the light's gone on. He reminds me of Bobby Ingram. He was coming up with tough third down catches, reliable hands. But then you wouldn't see him. He would disappear for 3 or 4 games unless they're trying to get him a ball at the end of the game to get an incentive. It does feel like the David Moore experiment has run its course, and that there's no more ceiling left for him to find. That number 3 spot, whether that's Dorsett or not, kind of needs to be improved.
Yeah, I agree with you. David Moore in the first half of the season did make some big plays, and he was looking good. He looked like he had taken a next step. And then whether it was part of the scheme failures that we saw in the second half of the season or what, But, we saw too much jet sweep with him. And, I even think about I forget which game it was. There was a play where Russ was running for it on third down, and then he decided to throw deep to David Moore, and which was not the right choice because he had wide open field, but he still completed it.
That's a pretty classic David Moore play.
Exactly. It's something you don't even expect. Like, why did that happen? That shouldn't even happen. But, it was a great play that set him up for a score there. But you're right. I mean, he was really a flash in the pan kind of guy. Like every once in a while a flash play, but just not the consistency you need. And I think it's not his fault. I don't blame David Moore. I blame the coaches for putting David Moore in not the spots that are most conducive for his production. So I really feel like they do need to upgrade their that third spot. But Philip Dorsett might be the guy, or maybe the draft provides something there. Or tight ends, with Shane Waldron maybe using the tight ends better. That would be helpful too.
I want to ask you this. So I think we all agree, and it feels a lot like the 2018 wild card loss, that execution, play calling, that the Seahawks should have beat the Rams in that wild card game and moved on. But then I wonder if they would have gone any farther than that. Watching the playoffs closely as I have this year, it just feels like the gap that next week to the final 8 teams, especially the final 4, was a really, really wide gap. How far away do you think the Seahawks truly are from being able to play on that last weekend, the division, the league championship game, being a Final 4 type team in the NFC? Are they as close as fans we all think they are and want to believe they are, or is it a bigger gap than that?
Well, if you listen to KJ Wright, what he said right after the season was he felt this was the team that had the best chance since the 2014 team of getting back to the Super Bowl. So he felt like the talent is there. Now, he might have been looking at it more from a defensive perspective and not seeing what had happened to their offense. I personally watched their offense fade even before everybody saw it happening. I mean, even when they beat the Eagles, for example, I said, "Man, this offense is having problems," and it was obvious. and it just continued. And it was dumbfounding that it did continue for 2 whole months, and all the way into – so when they got to the Rams game in the playoffs, I was like, okay, we all know there's going to be a real ugly offensive game because the Rams, Aaron Donald and company have Russ's number. They just do. We knew that it was going to be one of those scrappy games where, but I think I thought that they would pull it out just like, it would be like, that 20-9 win that they had a couple weeks before that, it would be something similar to that. The Rams offense was scuffling along. Obviously,
really
they lose a quarterback. Goff has to come back in. I mean, there was all kinds of drama on their offense, for that game. And our defense, did their job. They did their job. It's not their fault that the special teams, turned the ball over, that we gave up a pick 6. That's 2 touchdowns that the defense had nothing to do with, basically. So the defense was ready. The defense had gotten itself in position to make that run to the Super Bowl. But the offense, we had seen it, flutter and fail all the way to the end. And even if they'd beaten the Rams, it was still going to have trouble in New Orleans the next week because New Orleans had a great defense too. So I didn't see them beating the Saints, definitely, once they got past the Rams. I felt like they'd beat the Rams, go to New Orleans and lose. That's what I thought was going to happen. Yeah. But, obviously they fell short of that even.
And I feel like if that had happened, I think everyone would have felt better about the season. Like it's just that it just feels like 2018. I don't think anyone had any designs on the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl that year. They just should have won that first game. It leaves an entirely different taste on your mouth to lose the second weekend as it does to get bounced in that first round.
This is bigger than that. It's a cross between 2017 and 18 because 2017 is when they fired Darrell Bevell and Tom Cable, got Schottenheimer, and that's where we are here. So, and that was after the offense tanked in December, just kind of like, and it was a complete mess at the end. Like you didn't even know what was going on. It looked like Russ didn't know what was going on. And that's what happened this year. Didn't it look like Russ knew what was going on? You know? So when the quarterback looks confused and he's a 9-year veteran, that's a problem. You know? So yeah, I feel like you're right. It is part 2018. And then if they'd won a game, they probably wouldn't have changed, but unless the offense really you tanked twice in a row and they just kind of lucked out on the Rams win. Maybe Pete would have done it, but losing the way they did, I knew Pete had a decision to make. And even when he said the next day, Monday or whatever it was after, he said, Pete, the main media was saying, he says that Schottenheimer's staying. And I parsed what he said and I said, no, that's not really. He said it was a very light yes. There was still room that he said we're evaluating. So I knew it wasn't done for sure. Yeah. And that there was a chance that he might, I put it at like 30% that he might make the move. I still thought 70% chance that Schottenheimer would still be here. But obviously, that's why they made the move is because of what happened in the playoffs.
Well, you make a good point. It'll be interesting to look back on this a couple of years from now. And if Shane Waldron turns out to be the answer, to know that if they had somehow won that game against the Rams, that Schottenheimer probably keeps his job. That could be a real impactful decision for years to come on the Seahawks organization. Before we get out of here today, I want to do something you and I haven't really talked about. For those of you who don't know, Chris has written a couple of books on the Seahawks. You can find them both on Amazon. One, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly of the Seattle Seahawks, and the other one, From Zorn to Largent, the best Seahawks stories ever told. We've got about 5 minutes here. What's your favorite Seahawks story that you've ever heard?
Oh, my favorite Seahawks story. Well, that book, Then Zorn Said to Largent, are you talking about from the books or just like in season? Like what?
Well, I'm giving you a chance to promote your product here, but if you want to go, want to go off book, you can as well.
No, I was just going to say that Dave Wyman and Paul Moyer were it was their stories from insider type stories that they were telling from
those guys are great.
Chuck Knox in the 80s. All the way through the dead years of the 90s, the Ken Behring years, and there were just a lot of great stories. But I think the ones that kind of take you in the locker room and the players, like a prime example is trying to make weight. Back in the day, they weren't very healthy about how they lost weight. Paul Moyer says, Chuck Knox was such a stickler for everybody hitting their weight on by Friday at the end of the week. And then he said they'd go out, the players after they hit their weight, they'd go out to Ezel's and eat chicken and stuff. And so Paul Moyer said he'd gain like 5 pounds over Saturday and he'd be all sluggish on Sunday because they'd all pigged out because they hit their weight and then they, showed up, just kind of lethargic sometimes, So just funny stories like that. There are a lot of good stories like that about guys. Just back in those days, it was like old time football. It's not as high tech as it is now with Seahawks are now.
Well, speaking of Paul Moyer, when you researched the book with him and sat down with him, did he talk about the ruptured testicle game?
Oh yeah.
Because to me, that's the craziest thing still to this day I've ever heard.
He did. He talked about that, and he basically he got kneed. I think it was Orson Mobley or one of Denver's tight ends. Need him in the nuts. He played the entire game and didn't know until the end of the game in the locker room when he's changing his stuff, and all of a sudden he's got this big swollen and all his teammates are like, oh my gosh, you played with that the entire game. So yeah, it was that's definitely one of the more gruesome stories in Seahawks history.
Tough SOB. I got one more question for you.
Sure.
Kind of got lost in the shuffle a couple of weeks ago because of the Schottenheimer news, and that's where all the fans like to focus. But John Schneider gets his extension. He'll be here through, I believe, the draft in 2027. That extends by about a year and a half beyond the end of Carroll's new extension, which keeps him with the team through 2025. Do you think that's the way it works out? Do you think John Schneider, there was talk this offseason, Detroit might make a run at him. There was another team that wanted to contact him. He certainly seems like this is home, like he's not interested in going anywhere. Do you think the long game for him is to outlast Carroll and get a shot to hire his coach someday?
Yeah, I feel like that's where it's going now. I mean, he's, Green Bay is always in the back of his mind, though. So you never know. That's home for him. He grew up in Wisconsin. He started with the Packers. I think if he ever had a chance to go back there, that would be the one place he does go. But, Pete has a 5-year deal, but you really can count on 2 or 3 of those years and then see. I think after 3 years, you see where he wants to go from there. I mean, is 3 years enough for him? Have they gotten back to the Super Bowl? I think he really wants to. I think he wants to piece together, this team, and it's defensively. I think he thinks it's really close to what he wants now. They put together a secondary using veterans instead of the draft, and they got Carlos Dunlap. So they have a couple years here where these guys can match up. I think Dunlap, if they extend him for a couple of years, he and Pete will match up as far as And Dunlap certainly helps Jaron Reed and the rest of the line, and the secondary is pretty set once they extend Jamal Adams. So I feel like we've got a good 3 years left. And for the people who don't like Pete, sorry guys, but you probably got about 3 years left for sure of Pete. And then I think Schneider, having re-signed, and I'm pretty. People who read my stuff know that I've got my complaints about Schneider,
sure.
About what he's done.
Yeah.
But, he has also done good things.
Yep.
I'm bringing in Dunlap was a huge move to help them out. That's what they needed to do before the season, and he did it during the season. Fine. That turned him around, and that's what they needed from the beginning, and I think a lot of us knew that. They needed that pass rusher. So those kind of things that I know you can't, do whatever you want anytime you want. So I understand, limited by certain things. But Schneider, he's done well enough to help them stay in the playoffs, and certainly he did in season a good enough job for them to get that defense turned around. So we will see what he does. Outlast if he outlasts Pete.
Chris, we gotta go. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here on the Emerald City Sportscast next week, everybody. Thank you.
That sounds good. Thanks, Dan.